George was 74 years old when the chest pains began. Not sharp, not sudden, just a dull pressure, like something heavy resting on his heart. His daughter Emily had noticed the change long before he did. "Dad, you're walking slower lately," she said. He smiled and waved her off. "Just the years catching up, honey." But when the doctor looked at his blood work and his medical history, one question stood out among the rest. "How often do you eat seafood?" George was proud of his answer. "Almost every day. I thought I was doing everything right." And that's when the doctor sighed, opened a drawer, and pulled out a printed list. At the top of that list were 6 common fish, 6 types that George had been eating for years, believing he was nourishing his heart, his brain, and his aging body. What he didn't know was that some of those fish were quietly working against him, raising his cholesterol, triggering his joint pain, and possibly even contributing to the memory lapses he'd been laughing off. That moment, in that quiet exam room, marked the beginning of George's journey, not just to change what was on his plate, but to understand the subtle traps that even healthy foods can set for those over 60. This story is not just about George. It's about all of us who grew up believing fish was always a safe, smart choice. It's about the science we didn't hear in our youth. It's about listening to our bodies and relearning what it means to nourish them well. And in the chapters that follow, you'll uncover the surprising truth behind 6 popular fish older adults should think twice about. Fish that can silently sabotage your health if you're not careful. But more than that, you'll step into real, relatable lives. Stories of people like George. People who made small, powerful changes that gave them more energy, sharper minds, and stronger hearts. Because knowledge, when paired with action, is more than survival, it's freedom. And after 60, freedom is everything. Chapter 1. The Price of a Delicacy. When Squid Turns on the Body. Margaret always believed in eating well. At 69, she had spent decades preparing meals from scratch, sourcing ingredients from the local market, and saying no thank you to most processed foods. But there was one indulgence she never gave up, not even in her retirement years. Squid. Grilled calamari, crispy fried rings, tender braised tentacles in tomato stew. It was her favorite dish. "It's lean," she used to say with a laugh. "And besides, seafood is good for the heart, right?" But that assumption was quietly betraying her body. The first time she woke up with swollen fingers, she chalked it up to the weather. The second time, it was her knees. By the time she had her first serious flare-up, an aching, fiery pain in her toe that left her limping for days, she knew something was wrong. Her doctor diagnosed it as gout. "I don't understand," she said, staring at the list of high-purine foods he handed her. "I eat healthy." And then she saw it. Bolded. Underline. Squid. The hidden chemistry of squid. Squid isn't an inherently evil food. In fact, it contains protein, some beneficial minerals, and omega-3s. But for older adults, especially those navigating cholesterol issues or inflammatory conditions like arthritis and gout, squid has 2 distinct problems. High cholesterol content. Just 100 grams of squid carries around 260 milligrams of cholesterol. For adults over 60, whose risk of cardiovascular issues is already elevated due to age, genetics, and slower metabolism, that's a heavy load to process. Excess dietary cholesterol doesn't always show symptoms until it's too late. It clogs quietly, building plaques, narrowing arteries, and increasing blood pressure. It's like rust inside a water pipe. You don't notice it until the water stops flowing smoothly. Rich in purines. Purines break down into uric acid, which, when accumulated in excess, crystallizes in joints, triggering gout, a condition that is not only painful, but also damaging over time, especially for those already dealing with joint degradation or reduced mobility. Margaret had never been warned. She had eaten squid regularly for over 15 years, believing it was a smart, protein-packed alternative to red meat. But no one had explained to her how aging changes the game, how what was healthy at 40 could become harmful at 70. The emotional toll of unseen damage. Beyond the physical pain, the hardest part for Margaret was the betrayal. "I was trying to do things right," she confided to her daughter one afternoon, tears welling up in her tired eyes. "I wasn't eating junk food, I was eating seafood. Why didn't anyone tell me?" That's the reality for many older adults. We are praised for choosing seafood, without being taught that not all fish are created equal, especially when our bodies become more sensitive with age. The metabolism slows, inflammation becomes chronic, the systems that once detoxified quietly and efficiently begin to struggle. No one wants to fear the food on their plate. But ignoring the conversation won't stop the consequences. A better path forward. Margaret didn't have to give up seafood, she just needed information and guidance. Her doctor helped her adjust her diet. She replaced squid with wild-caught salmon, mackerel, and sardines in moderation, rich in omega-3s but lower in purines and cholesterol. She started using turmeric and ginger in her cooking, natural anti-inflammatories. And most importantly, she tracked her symptoms and listened to her body. 3 months later, she was walking comfortably again. The swelling had reduced, her energy was better, but what had changed the most wasn't just physical, it was her relationship with food. "I still love seafood," she said, smiling softly, "but now I choose the ones that love me back." Takeaway for the reader. If you or someone you love is over 60 and still enjoying squid frequently, it's time to reconsider. That chewy bite may come with hidden costs. High cholesterol levels that increase heart disease risk. Purine overload leading to gout and joint pain. A false sense of healthy eating that isn't aligned with an aging body's needs. Small changes now can mean fewer pills later, less pain, more mobility, a better quality of life. You don't have to give up everything, but you do have to make wiser decisions. Because every bite, especially after 60, is either a step toward health or a quiet step away from it. Chapter 2. The Truth About Escolar, a Dangerous Delicacy. Helen always considered herself adventurous when it came to food. At 68, she prided herself on trying new dishes and keeping life flavorful. On her 45th wedding anniversary, she and her husband dined at a coastal restaurant that offered a special, grilled Escolar, marketed as butterfish for its rich, oily texture. Neither had heard of it before, but the waiter's description was enticing. The meal was delicious, silky, decadent. Helen even joked it was the smoothest fish she'd ever tasted. But later that night, Helen began experiencing severe stomach cramps. Then came the oily diarrhea and nausea. It lasted over 12 hours, draining her energy completely. She was confused and embarrassed. What kind of food could do this? What Helen didn't know was that Escolar contains wax esters, a type of fat the human digestive system can't break down. For seniors like Helen, whose digestion naturally slows with age, this leads to intense gastrointestinal distress, dehydration, and weakness. In fact, some health agencies worldwide warn against selling Escolar altogether. Worse still, Escolar can trigger dizziness and imbalance, making it a double threat for older adults already at higher risk for falls. Helen's story is far from rare. After learning more, she was shocked to realize that Escolar wasn't a rare treat. It was a health trap for people her age. Since then, Helen avoids Escolar completely, and she now shares her story with friends to help them steer clear of this dangerous delicacy. Your takeaway? If you're over 60, it's best to avoid Escolar. No matter how tasty it seems, the risks to your digestion, balance, and well-being just aren't worth it. Chapter 3. The Mercury Mistake. Why white tuna could steal your memory. George had always been a tuna lover. At 73, the white tuna salad sandwich was his go-to lunch. Easy, light, and full of protein. Healthy choice, he often said as he opened another can of albacore, not knowing that choice was slowly turning against him. But over time, George started forgetting things. His daughter noticed it first. He'd lose his train of thought mid-sentence. Then he began mixing up appointments, even names. His doctor ran tests, no signs of dementia yet. But there was something alarming in his system. Elevated mercury levels. What George didn't know was that albacore white tuna contains much more mercury than light tuna. And mercury isn't just a toxin, it's a neurotoxin, especially dangerous for aging brains. In people over 60, mercury builds up faster because the body takes longer to clear it. Over time, it can quietly impair memory, mood, and concentration. symptoms George had begun to live with. The worst part? He thought he was eating healthy. His doctor gently explained, "White tuna's mercury content is too high for regular meals at your age. Once a month max. Any more can quietly chip away at your clarity." Now George has made the switch. Light tuna, wild salmon and sardines, in moderation. His focus is returning. And he's not just eating for convenience anymore, he's eating for his brain. The lesson? If you're over 60, don't assume a fish labeled heart healthy is brain healthy too. Albacore tuna can be toxic in silence. Make the smart swap now before your memory becomes a casualty. Chapter 4, The Hidden Salt Trap, When Sardines Hurt More Than Help. Margaret was 78 and proud of the changes she had made. No more red meat, less sugar, more walking, and in her pantry, neatly stacked, were her little silver helpers. Cans of sardines. Omega-3s for my heart, she would tell her neighbor, believing each bite was helping her live longer. But something strange began happening. Her ankles swelled more often, her blood pressure, once under control, crept higher, and worst of all, her gout, something she hadn't felt in years, flared up again, with a vengeance. At her next checkup, her doctor asked about her diet. Sardines, almost daily, she smiled, but his face turned serious. Sardines, he said gently, are a double-edged sword. Yes, they're rich in omega-3s, but they're also high in sodium and purines, two things that spell trouble for older adults. Just one small can can contain over 500 milligrams of salt, a quiet saboteur of blood pressure and kidney function. And the purines, they're broken down into uric acid, the fuel behind her painful gout flare. No one had ever told Margaret that something so healthy could bring her so much harm. So she made a shift. She still enjoys sardines, but now only once a week, choosing fresh over canned when possible and rinsing them to remove excess salt. And she balances them with leafy greens, water, and a little lemon juice. The truth? Even the healthiest foods can become harmful if we don't adjust them to the needs of an aging body. Because after 65, every bite should be a step toward healing, not hurting. Chapter 5, Tilapia, the fish that tricks the heart. For years, Mr. Tan believed he was doing everything right. Boiled vegetables, less rice, and tilapia, lots of tilapia. It was cheap, soft, easy to digest, and didn't upset his stomach like red meat did. He ate it 3 times a week, sometimes 4. It's fish, he told his daughter proudly, good for the heart. But slowly, his joints ached more in the morning, his blood pressure wasn't as steady, his energy dipped. It didn't make sense until his granddaughter, a nutrition student, gently shared what she had learned in class. "Grandpa," she said softly, "tilapia has more omega-6 than omega-3, and too much omega-6 fuels inflammation." Her words struck a chord. She showed him research. How farmed tilapia, especially the kind imported in bulk, tends to have an imbalanced fat profile. While it's low in mercury, it's very high in omega-6 fatty acids, which, in excess, can silently worsen arthritis, joint stiffness, and even heart disease. Worse still, she explained how most tilapia is farmed in poor-quality water overseas, often exposed to chemicals and low-quality feed that diminish its health value. Mr. Tang was stunned. The fish he trusted had been quietly inflaming his body. So he made a change. He cut back to just 1 tilapia meal a week and replaced the rest with wild salmon, mackerel, and sardines with reduced sodium. Within a month, he felt the difference. His hands weren't as stiff, his blood pressure readings improved, and his mood lifted. Sometimes the harm isn't in what we eat once, but in what we eat over and over without question. Because not every mild food is mild in its effects, especially on a body that's been through decades of living. Chapter 6. Eel, a hidden luxury with a heavy price. Lan only had eel once a year, always at New Year. It was a tradition, rich, flavorful, and a symbol of luck. Her son would bring home a beautifully grilled piece from the Japanese market. It was expensive, it was delicious, and Lan believed it was a reward, one she had earned after a long, hard life. But this past year was different. After the meal, she felt dizzy. Her heart raced. She felt unusually tired. Her son brushed it off as fatigue. She nodded along, but deep down, she felt something was wrong. What she didn't know was that eel, while luxurious and tasty, comes with a silent burden. especially for older adults. It is extremely high in fat, nearly 25 grams per 100 grams, much more than the average fish, and for aging bodies, processing that much fat in one go becomes a challenge. It strains the liver, burdens the heart, and raises cholesterol quickly. But worse than fat is what lurks within: toxins. Eels, especially freshwater ones, absorb mercury, dioxins, and PCBs, pollutants that accumulate in their fatty tissues. These toxins don't just pass through the body, they linger, quietly embedding in organs, damaging the brain, weakening the immune system, and increasing the risk of neurological diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. For younger people, a single indulgence might be harmless, but for someone over 60 with a slower metabolism and a more fragile nervous system, it's different. Land's doctor later confirmed it wasn't the eel alone, but the buildup of lifestyle choices that needed urgent attention. Eel was just the final, heavy drop in a full cup. She made a decision. No more eel, not even at New Year. Instead, she chose a lighter meal with grilled salmon and vegetables. She created a new tradition, one where health wasn't sacrificed for luxury. Because when you reach a certain age, every choice either adds to your years or takes from them. Land chose to stay. Chapter 7. So what can you eat instead? Mr. Bin sat in his kitchen looking down at a handwritten list his granddaughter had left on the table. It was titled, "Good Fish for Grandpa." Underneath, in her neat handwriting, were 3 words: salmon, mackerel, trout. Simple, clean, powerful. At 76, Mr. Bin had dealt with enough confusion. His memory wasn't what it used to be. Sometimes his knees ached when the weather changed. But this list? This made sense. After a lifetime of eating whatever was affordable, available, and sometimes simply habitual, he was finally beginning to choose food as medicine. He learned that not all fish were dangerous. In fact, some, like salmon and mackerel, were among the best choices for older adults. Rich in omega-3 fatty acids, they soothed inflammation, supported brain function, and even helped keep the heart beating stronger. Trout was another gentle hero. Less fatty than some, but still full of healthy oils. Easy to cook, easy to digest, perfect for his age. Mr. Bin made a promise to himself. He would replace danger with nourishment. And not just for himself, for his wife, his neighbors, anyone who would listen. He pinned the list to his fridge. From that day forward, it wasn't about fear, it was about wisdom. The kind of wisdom that grows when you choose better, not just younger. Final words: the power of knowing, the peace of choosing. If you've followed this journey to the end, you've likely realized something profound. It's not just about avoiding a certain type of fish. It's about waking up. About looking at your plate and asking, is this helping me or hurting me? About understanding that your body has changed, but your power to protect it hasn't. The 6 fish we discussed, squid, escolar, albacore tuna, sardines, tilapia, and eel, each carry hidden risks. Especially as we grow older, when our systems slow down and even the tiniest misstep can echo for weeks, months, or longer. But knowledge gives us a way out. You don't have to fear food, you simply have to choose with care. Replace what harms with what heals. Swap what confuses your body with what supports it. Because aging gracefully isn't about avoiding birthdays. It's about protecting your joy, your energy, and your moments with every bite you take. So the next time you stand in front of the seafood section, take a breath. Remember this story and pick something that loves you back. Until next time, take care of yourself. We'll see you in the next video with more stories, more wisdom, and more simple ways to live well after 60. You're not alone. You're not powerless. You're just getting started.